What's up, everybody, and welcome to Forgotten History. Today's episode, the Jewett City or Griswold Vampire. In the early 1800s, there lived an average, poor, but hard-working farmer named John. There was nothing remarkable about John. John and his family lived in what is now Griswold or Jewett City. In 1819, John died. His family, land, and even the cemetery they were buried in were lost in time. Like I said, he was an average man. Let's skip to the year 1990. 171 years have passed since John has died. Griswold, or Jewett City, is now a populated community of neighborhoods and businesses. One day, two children were sliding down a hill playing when they came across two weird-looking rocks. They dug them up to find them to be human skulls. The authorities were called and an investigation ensued. At first, it was thought to be a dumping ground of the serial killer Michael Ross from the early 1980s, later to be confirmed to be the Walton family burial grounds. While excavating, on one coffin lid there was JB 55 written in brass tacks on the cover of the coffin. Assuming that it was initials in the age of death, and just a few feet away from JB was a coffin with NB 13. The entire Walton burial ground was exhumed and reburied a few miles away from the original spot, except for JB 55. Let's again skip a few years, this time 2022. Now with DNA testing and genealogical research, we now know that John, his real name, instead of JB, is John Barber. He died at the age of 55 years old from tuberculosis. When they initially exhumed his body, his skull was detached from his backbone and twisted, and his femurs were placed in an X on his ribs. Now that can only indicate one thing. John Barber was the Jewett City vampire or the Griswold vampire. Now, the discovery of JB was an accidental discovery. Two children just happened to be in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place, depending on how you look at it. But there is another vampire in Jewett City. Let's welcome the Ray family. In 1854, Lucy Ray had a problem. Her son Henry Nelson was sick, showing the same symptoms that took her husband Henry and two other sons, Elijah and Lemuel, in the last 9 years. Having no medical knowledge and only 2 miles away from where JB 55 was buried 50 years earlier, it's not so far-fetched that she did the only thing she could to save Henry Nelson, herself and her remaining children. It was the only obvious explanation. The devil was here and targeting her family. Her husband was spared, but Emil and Eliza were exhumed and burned. The burned remains were then reinterred. Oddly enough, there is no record of Henry Nelson's death. It is assumed that he survived. This is just an afterthought of this episode. Griswold, Jewett City was my hometown. I grew up hearing stories about this all the time. I've done tons and tons of research on this. It is absolutely insane to think that Lucy and or the wife of John Barber, what they had to go through by digging up their loved ones, taking their skeletons apart, burning the bodies. It's absolutely insane to me. But I mean, today's medical knowledge is far superior to what they had back then. They really didn't know. So in closing, Thank you guys for listening. See you next time.